Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm really excited to kick off a brand new series in my channel, which I'm sure you will enjoy. It's all about exploring the less conventional path in dermatology, those career routes that don't necessarily follow the standard training path but are equally interesting and full of potential. If you are considering a career in dermatology and are curious about the available opportunities out there, this video is for you. We'll be talking to people who have carved out unique careers in dermatology. And in this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Adlene, a medical doctor who took an unconventional path, now working as a medical science liaison at a pharmaceutical company. In this video, she shared her experiences working as an MSL in a pharmaceutical company, pros and cons, as well as what a day in a life looks like. So let us jump right into the conversation. Welcome everyone to my channel. For those who don't know me, I'm Chris and I'm a dermatology trainee based in Glasgow in Scotland. And on my channel, I share my experiences working as a dermatology trainee. So this is a rather special session where I have got a guest finally, and that's Adlene. She works in the pharmaceutical company as a physician, and she's going to tell us more about her role, how she ends up where she is, and I guess for anyone who's interested in becoming like her in the future, stay tuned. So let's get to the juicy bits then, Adlene. So tell me, how did you get started in this? What did you do and how did you end up where you are?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Firstly, Chris, I must say, I've always been a big fan of yours for many years because I've been watching your videos, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak in your podcast. And in terms of your question, I did my medical training in Liverpool, University of Liverpool, and then I graduated. And I did my F1, F2 training in Blackburn, and then I did my IMT1, IMT2. And after that, I did a clinical research fellow in immunology at Leeds, and it was a fantastic experience. I've always been interested in dermatology, and I've always been interested in just how the skin works. And within my role as an immunology senior clinical fellow, I've been exposed to quite a few therapy areas that patient struggles to find good treatment. And that opened up opportunities on being a clinical trial physician as an NHS doctor. So I was a co-investigator for several clinical trials and in my role, and that opened up my eyes to an opportunity within pharmaceuticals, because I was very much determined to either pursue dermatology or immunology, because those two specialties, they're quite interlinked and they're very complex. And I like the complexity of those two specialties and how there's a multidisciplinary approach. And it's true patients with very visual sort of conditions. And even in immunology, you have quite a lot of swelling. I see patients in allergy clinics, and they sometimes autoinflammatory conditions as well. That's very unique, and you don't really have much exposure in the medical training. And in IMT2 as well, I had 4 months worth of placement in dermatology.
Oh, wow.
Which was really great. It gave me a really good exposure and gave me an idea of what I would like to pursue. And as interesting as dermatology is to me, I also wanted to open my eyes to other sorts of specialty to make my decision. Following IMT2, I did immunology, and it was really an eye-opener because lots of patients, they don't come in with their condition. They come in with conditions that they find it difficult to still manage it. They still have their swelling, like patients with hereditary angioedema, despite their medication. And then that's why there's always new companies producing drugs that can actually help close the gap in the market of treating them. And I think pharmaceutical medicine is another pathway in life to also positively impact patients' life, but in a third-person kind of a backseat. But there is also role in physicians in pharmaceutical medicine, which I think is the main reason why I pursued it. So, yeah.
I have to say, before I met you, I knew very little about pharmaceutical companies, only, I guess, when they come and talk about their products, then do I interact with them. So it's quite nice to see, as a doctor, you can be involved in pharmaceutical roles as well. Did you, just going back to your experiences, you mentioned that you were involved in a few clinical trials. Did you know of anyone who was in your role that you are at the moment? Or like, how did you get the information and how did you transition from being a clinician in NHS doing direct clinical care to where you are?
So yeah, that's a very good question. At that time when I was doing clinical trials, I did meet a few doctors within pharmaceutical as well. When I was networking, when we had to attend several like clinical site investigator meeting, we attended just the manufacturing facility. Then I realized, oh, these are some doctors who are actually doing a different sort of role, but they have a background of medicine. And I started talking to them, networking, and realizing what opportunities there is, because not only are there opportunities in clinical trials, there's also opportunities in drug development and medical affairs, as well as pharmacovigilance, which we're not really exposed to back in medical school. Nobody talks about that, because a typical mindset is, okay, I'm going to be a cardiologist, a respiratory physician, a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist. So there's nothing talking about outside. But after playing with the idea, I realized outside of clinical medicine, there's also consultancy, there's pharmaceutical, there's loads of other opportunities. And I think even for me, I was very much tunnel vision. Oh, I have to get to this. I have to be a consultant in this specialty. But once I've been exposed to a little bit more and networking with other pharmaceutical physicians, then I realized the opportunities that is presented. And from there, I started applying for a ST3 posts. And one of the ST3 posts that came about is the pharmaceutical medicine specialist training. And I've just read this. It's all on I forgot the website, but basically the one with the person specification. It's all there for pharmaceutical medicine.
Is that the JCP TB website?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, it's all there, and I met quite a few who actually has CCT'd in pharmaceutical medicine online. So I saw their profile on LinkedIn, and then I just reached out to them, and they were happy to talk to me. And then they explained that the pharmaceutical is so broad and vast, you won't be able to do every sort of role. So it's best that you get into pharmaceutical medicine specialist training so that you understand the behind the scenes, what actually happens that you might not have an active role on. And since then, I've joined the specialist training. So it's a 4 years specialty training, because my role right now doesn't really involve with drug development, but this sort of training will be able for me to have certain exposures. And I can also help with certain projects that is out of my role. And that would be quite useful to just broaden my horizon and also make me aware of what sort of other opportunities there is available in the future if I were to choose to go to a different sort of sector in pharmaceutical medicine.
Wow, that's very impressive. I didn't realize that there is like a regulated, structured training pathway for pharmaceutical physicians like yourself. So that's quite interesting to know.
It's exactly the same as other sort of specialty, in a sense that we have the JRCPT portfolio, we have a QIP requirement. So it's still quite similar. You still can't run from QIPs, I'm afraid. And it follows you everywhere.
Do you need to do this training before you end up in the pharmaceutical industry?
So you need to actually have a role in pharmaceutical industry first before applying for the specialty training. It's just because only certain companies will support the specialty training. And there's a list available online as well. When I applied for jobs, I focus on those companies because I do want to CCT in something. And pharmaceutical medicine is it's a great opportunity to learn.
It does sound really impressive. I guess you can't run from QI projects no matter where you are.
No, I'm afraid.
You also mentioned a few opportunities that you can be involved in as a physician in a pharmaceutical company. Do you mind sharing some of the sort of day-to-day roles or responsibilities you have in your role?
Yeah, of course, that's absolutely fine. So I think the way I break things down for a pharmaceutical physician is medical affairs, clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, and safety. So I can talk about my current role in medical affairs is just because I'm currently doing it. So in my day-to-day role, I will interact with healthcare professionals. So which is a little bit different from working in the NHS where you interact more with patients. So my role does not have patient facing as much. So I talk to the healthcare professionals, doctors, pharmacists, nurses, whoever, and try to understand where I can support them. And it's a non-promotional role and it's purely a scientific exchange. So I can talk about the disease, and if the healthcare professional has any question about the drug that I am looking after, then I'm able to reactively respond to that. I don't proactively talk about the drug because I'm not a salesperson, but I'm more than happy to support any questions that they have, even if it's off license, but I must make sure that they understand it is an off-license question that they're asking. And aside from that, I also go to conferences. Recently came back from EADV, which is fantastic. Got a luggage full of creams. The luggage is still there. So great for Christmas gifts. And it was... Yes, it was a fantastic experience, and I must say the talks there was phenomenal. It's really in depth. And aside from going to conferences, I also do quite a lot of presentations. I present to the healthcare professionals. I was recently in BDNG this year in Harrogate, and I have presented a couple poster presentations, which is also required in any way in my ARCP. So that's great. Got that ticked off, and. Yeah, it's a very nice role, and instead of facing patients, we work in a multidisciplinary approach as well in my role. And I understand, like in the NHS, you talk to, as a dermatologist, you probably talk to immunologists, rheumatologists, or whatever specialty. But in my role, my MDT sort of approach is talking to my salesperson, talking to the marketing person, talking to the NHS patient support manager as well. So those external stakeholders that I have discussions with. And it's still quite similar, but in a different way.
Yes. Yeah. It's so interesting for you to say that the different roles that you have as a physician in medical affairs. I guess that means that as a clinician, we can come to you with any clinical question that we may have encountered at the workplace, and you can help us by looking in depth in the literature about conditions or medications that are related to what we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And it gives me a bit more credibility as well, being able to talk about this and understanding that since I've had good clinical practice for almost 5 years in the NHS, and I can incorporate that in my job, understanding, this sort of patient support or this sort of plan could be better integrated in clinics afterwards, or after having the sessions, or before, make it a QR code, because I've been there. I've been in a situation in clinical practice where I can see how it can be better incorporated in the day-to-day clinic.
Yeah.
So I think I leverage my clinical practice for my job, definitely.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it does make it easier for us to, in terms of using medical jargon, speaking about patient care more freely if we are communicating with someone who is a doctor as well. Okay, I guess on the flip side, do you miss direct clinical care? Do you miss seeing patients? Because from what you're saying, you don't really deal with patients now.
No, yeah, I don't really deal with patients. I could choose to locum if I still wanted to, because I still have my indemnity. But I think now I enjoy my weekends to myself. Yeah. In a sense, I do miss seeing patients, because I like that one-to-one care that I give, and seeing them slowly progress and getting better. That's a really nice and satisfying aspect of the job. But I think this sort of job gives me a different approach, and it is great to hear, this patient is actually getting better from the drug that we are involved in, and then seeing that they having their own testimony, talking to us about it, and then being involved in like compassionate use as well. So that's all behind the scenes that actual clinical physicians don't really see, but now I'm seeing a lot more. So it gives a good patient impact, but in a different sort of way, definitely.
And is your work schedule quite structured then? You don't do any out of hours, weekend shifts in your role?
Yeah. I think, in terms of work-life balance, it's quite good. But it's similar to the medical specialty, maybe the level, is it level 2? Like IMT?
Group 2.
Stage
Group 2 specialty.
Yes, that's the name. Yeah, Group 2 specialty.
Like dermatology.
Like dermatology, exactly. And because my work life is quite similar when I was an immunology registrar. It's still 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And during my on-calls in immunology, it was within 9 to 5, and not after 5 was consultants on call. Yeah. So it's still similar to me. So there's not much difference, but much better than IMT.
Yes,
definitely.
Yes. I can't, I guess, imagine myself doing IMT or CMT when I did it in the past. Yeah, it was intense.
Yeah.
Tell me surely I think transitioning from working in the hospital to the role that you are in will come with some challenges. What are some of the challenges you faced when transitioning between these two roles?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one of the major challenge is the steep learning curve that I had to go through when I first started the job, because there's quite a lot of terminology that I wasn't too familiar. Detail aids, advisory board, a legitimate exchange, those are just new words that I needed to understand, and as well as the positions in pharmaceutical medicine, the hierarchical position. Everyone is very supportive and very lovely, but I think just understanding how the structure works and everyone's role was quite challenging, because I remember at the start I was a bit confused. What's the difference with marketing and sales? They sound the same to me, but they're completely different. They're completely different things. And understanding who to go to if patient support and as well NHS access, they are two also different things. Being aware of the structure and organization was challenging because I was new. I was able to ask all the silly questions at the start, and everyone was just very lovely to help me understand who to escalate issues to and who to talk to if I have certain issues. That was one of them, I would say. And another big challenge as well is in my understanding my day-to-day role, of what I'm meant to do, because I had a vague idea of what I'm supposed to do, but because I've never been in the role itself, I just have to make sure my role is more reactive. I'm not going to be going out talking about medication because that's a salesperson. My role is non-promotional, scientific exchange, and that is it. I can only talk about the medication if a healthcare professional asks about it. Other than that, I talk about the disease. I proactively talk about the condition itself and also the clinical trials that is involved. And that's basically it. Yeah.
It sounds like you are, even though you work for the pharmaceutical company, you are actually quite different from the sales representative. So you are in a separate sort of domain, so to speak, where you are just focused on medicine and research, and you don't promote any of the products that your company might be selling in a way. Am I right to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's a very good story. Yeah.
I have to say I have no idea about all these things, the stuff that you can or you can't do until I have a discussion with you. It's very interesting. It's not something that we as clinicians think about, because we talk about medicine quite freely in our day-to-day conversation.
Exactly. No, just to echo that as well, Chris. So I've now have a new profound appreciation for materials, because sometimes with the materials that comes out, it must be clearly if it's promotional or non-promotional, it needs to be clearly stated. And there must be a number at the bottom. There must be a black triangle, an adverse event. So we have something called the ABPI code. And that's just a code that we have to abide to make sure that we retain the respect and the integrity and the credibility of pharmaceutical medicine in the healthcare professionals' eyes as well as the public's eyes. There's just compliance and regulation purposes we have to. Yeah, definitely. So to make sure that our first thing that we prioritize is patient care and the integrity of that and the transparency of what we do. So it has to be clear, and if not, it gives exposure to litigation issues. So best to follow. And as a doctor, I'm coming from the NHS.
Governed by
wasn't really aware of all of that by the GMC. Yeah, exactly. So now not only am I governed by the GMC, I'm also governed by the ABPI code. So it's more rules to follow.
Yeah. I guess that makes everything safer for the patients overall. You mentioned a little bit about your medical background, and you gave the sense that having a medical background helped in your role as a doctor in this industry. Is there any perks of being a doctor in this industry, and how does having a medical background prepare you for the role that you are doing?
So I think my biggest advantage is having practice in clinical practice, because that differentiates me from other sort of people. Because in pharmaceutical, not everyone's coming from a doctor background. Some PhD, some are pharmacists, and specifically having practice in my therapy area, because I'm currently doing dermatology in pharmaceutical medicine, and I did electives in Australia when I was in medical school in dermatology, and I had 4 months experience in IMT2 in dermatology, and I did quite a lot of taster weeks. So I've had quite a good contact and understand how an AD clinic would run, how a general dermatology clinic would run, how emergency clinics, skin surgery clinics. So I'm fully aware of how things operates and how a QIP is done. So I think that gives me quite a lot of advantage, because yes, we have the scientific data, but incorporating that into clinical practice is a whole new ball game. And I'm aware of the difficulties in getting things done, perhaps the capacity of the clinic, the time that the physician has, the challenges with patients, because not all patients would be compliant to certain treatments if whatever cream is quite sticky and then the child doesn't like it. There's quite a lot of things to think about. And because I have a background of doing medicine in clinical practice, that helps me a lot in my role and it helps me secure my job. So I would definitely say an advice would be to stay in clinical practice as long as you can. And if you want to pursue pharmaceutical medicine, you can. That's absolutely fine. But having that wealth of information really differentiates you from the other applicants who would apply for the job. And also helps you build contacts as well, because since I've worked in areas like Leeds, I'm much more aware of the healthcare physicians there and in the department as well. And it just makes my role of developing relationships with them much easier. And being able to critically analyze papers as well is an essential thing. And it's very important for an NHS doctor when new advancements comes in. It's also very important for pharmaceutical, because there's always new clinical trials, always trying to compare a drug with another drug or with the placebo or whatever. It's all very important skills that I think my time in clinical practice has prepared me for.
And what are some of the highlights of doing your job that I guess I don't have?
I think it's a different sort of appreciation that I have. I like the fact that I get to talk to healthcare professionals and engage with them and see what sort of mindset that they have. And all of my interactions has been very positive and very nice, which can differ in clinical practice depending on the patients you see as well. And if it's very high pressure in the clinic or the wards, sometimes the interactions might not be the nicest. But because here everything is slow paced, and you do what you need to do and you interact with people who actually values your time as well. And it's very nice. And as well, hearing the patient stories as well, that clinicians are happy to use it, and understanding if certain challenges that comes with the management plan and helping to find solutions for that. It's still a creative way of doing the job. I have to think out the box. So how do I solve this issue? How can I make their life a bit better? And once I've figured the puzzle out, and they'll be very grateful for my help. And I think that's one of the highlights of my job, is actually seeing it progress and get better, like in projects and stuff, which is also the similar sort of highlights that I would get if I were to see patients, seeing them get better. But this is just in a different perspective.
I guess yours is more like a broader perspective, because you are actually shaping how clinical practice change with new treatments, compared to perhaps as a doctor seeing one patient improve. You are changing the whole sphere of industry.
Yeah, I think there's a whole big machine going on at the moment, and I am aware that I'm a part of it. But I think when all of us work together, we'll be moving the machine head on and definitely improving patient care in the long term. Yeah.
So I guess my next question is for doctors. Not me per se, because I'm already in dermatology and training, but for anyone who is thinking of perhaps joining the pharmaceutical company or industry as a career, as a doctor, or I guess if they are dissatisfied with their current role as a doctor and they are thinking of switching to a non-clinical job, what are some of the advice you would give to these people?
Yeah, of course. So I think my advice is to try to stay in clinical practice as long as you can, perhaps at a registrar stage if the earliest. I've seen people coming out of medicine straight after F2, and the jobs like consultancy that's also available to apply as well. And that's also, I've heard it's been fantastic. And I think it's just a great differentiator is to have some clinical practice if someone were to plan to get into pharmaceutical medicine. And then like even the PMSD program, the pharmaceutical medicine specialty training, you can't enter it unless you actually finish a MRCP. So you need to, because it's a training pathway. So similar to you becoming a dermatologist, you need to have your MRCP. It's a similar concept. So I think it would be best if you get as much clinical practice and work on if you can have opportunity working clinical trials as an NHS doctor, that would be fantastic, because it just gives your CV more things to talk about. Because I was a co-investigator for 3 clinical trials when I was an NHS doctor, and that gave me, so it was a fantastic experience, and it makes me realize, we always talk about these clinical trials, but how is it carried out it's carried out by doctors as well. I'm not sure about you, Chris, but if you were a clinical trial investigator in dermatology, but I've thoroughly enjoyed my role going and seeing patients, seeing whether they're getting better, giving rescue medication, having a look at them head to toe. So that's what clinical trials physician would do, and that role itself is available in pharmaceutical anyway. So I think that sort of role, you don't really need to stay in clinical practice that long, and which is absolutely fine. And I think doing specialties that are actually in need of new medication, for example, oncology, because cancer, there is no cure for cancer. If you do want to pursue life in pharmaceutical, perhaps having projects or experience in oncology would be great. I had mine in immunology. So having a good variety of specialties would be very useful, I would say.
That's very useful advice. You mentioned about MRCP. Are there any other requirements or prerequisites people need to have before they start to think about transitioning?
If specifically for the pharmaceutical specialty training, you need to make sure you complete your 2 years mandatory foundation as well as your 2 or 3 years medical, or you can also do surgical training or whatever training you have. But you need to have passed your exam, either it's a MRCP, MRCS, MRCPH, the pediatrics one, or any member of a college member exam, essentially, before applying for pharmaceutical medicine. But you also need to be in the role prior to application. And the companies must be specific with the list that is provided in the PMSD website on which company supports this training, and you need to find your own educational supervisor. So I do have mine, and he's
That seems very challenging.
Yeah, you find it yourself. It's not given to you. Yeah, but it's a very nice, interesting perspective, though, because now not only do I use my clinical practice and my medical knowledge, I also have to incorporate some sort of business acumen to my day-to-day activities, making sure that, yes, I am non-commercial and I focus on medical strategies, but at the back of my mind, I also need to remember the strategies that the company is pursuing as well.
So it's exactly the same as any higher specialty training, in fact, what you've just said.
Yeah.
What is something people don't quite know or misunderstand about working in the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, of course. I think a misconception is that it's always about selling drugs. But it's not always the case. Selling the drug is an important aspect of it, but as well as the supporting patient in patient support programs, as well as discussing with the healthcare professionals about the clinical trials, even if it's off-license questions, medical would be able to reactively respond to that. And as well as thinking in the bigger picture, building relationships with the healthcare professionals, and just working together with the other sort of what we call internal stakeholders. And then it's like a multidisciplinary approach if you think about it in the NHS. So I think at the end of the day, what's important is patient care. And we can actually go out of our way to make sure patients have what they have. And working together with physicians in the NHS has been a great experience for me. And I'm really enjoying the role. And hopefully, if anyone chooses to pursue, I'll be more than happy to talk to them as well about it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Just one last question, just for my selfish reason. No worries. As a doctor working in a hospital, say if I don't want to work in the pharmaceutical industry, but I would like to be involved in the future in some way, shape, or form. What are some of the opportunities I can be involved in?
I think as an NHS doctor, if you'd like to be involved in pharmaceutical, being a key expert on the therapy area that the company is pursuing interest in would be a very good position to be in. As a physician, you can be involved in advisory boards if the clinician has the appropriate knowledge to it, as well as clinical trial study unit for if you're interested, and you can tell the pharmaceutical company, and then they'll just ask what sort of trials you're interested in, and they can reach out to you, and then your site and your trust can carry them out as well. And that requires you need to have a research coordinator. You need to make sure you have the appropriate facilities and storage of certain drugs or whatever that the company requires you to have. And aside from that, you can be a speaker. You can speak for the company, and they will pay you appropriately for your time and for your preparation of slides and everything like that. And there's just loads of opportunities, if I'm being honest, but to be involved. But I would say being a consultant, being the the focus is more towards consultants. And registrars are also very valuable, but for you to be invited, like for an advisory board or speaker, pharmaceutical companies would approach consultants more. It's just because they have more experience and knowledge at hand, expertise, exactly.
And my last question is, like, for anyone wishing to know more about this alternative route, and thank you for sharing your own experience as well. Are there any online resources you would like to direct them, or websites that is available for them to read more on?
Yeah, of course. There's the Pharmaceutical Medicine Specialist Training website itself. It shows how you enroll, what is the requirement, and who do you approach to discuss about this, what sort of curriculum or educational needs that you're required to have in year 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that would be the main website. And it gives you sometimes networking events that people can come and join and ask questions if they like. And the college has been very responsive as well. So if anyone has questions, they can just directly email the college. And it may take 2 to 3 working days to reply, but they will reply.
Yes. That's great. And I will put the links in the description box.
I can forward you the link.
That's great.
Of course.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak about your experiences and answer some of the questions I have. I don't know if my viewers are interested in this, but I just thought it's quite cool to talk about alternative routes, not just the conventional specialist training pathway, but also other pathways that you can take as a physician in the UK. Well, thank you so much, Adlene, for taking the time on a Sunday afternoon. And I'm sure we'll meet again at some point.
Of course. Now, thank you so much for having me in the show. And please subscribe.
Oh, yes.
There you go.